Your creative process is a living entity that evolves just like you do. So when you feel stuck in a rut, rather than clawing to escape it, get curious about what it's trying to tell you. In this video, I'll share a simple 3-part framework that will prevent you from getting stuck in that feeling of stagnation ever again. But first, hi, I'm Athena. Right now, I like talking about metacognition as it relates to creativity, discipline, and spirituality. So that's the kind of work you're gonna find on this channel. Let's get into the video. Part 1, recognize the rut without getting stuck. Listen, being stuck is a choice once you're aware of it. Once you have realized that you are feeling stagnant or you're feeling like you're in a rut, you then have the opportunity and the awareness to make different choices so that you can get out of this sensation. Once you recognize that you are dissatisfied with your creative process or with the work that you're making, take some time to understand the root of the problem, but then your job is to dream up solutions. Earlier this year, I was not compelled by the work that I was producing for my newsletter and for YouTube. It wasn't hitting how I needed it to hit. My transition into a creative rut was very slow moving, but it creeped inward where at first I didn't really like the products that I was making. And then I was like, oh, the ideas aren't really hitting. And then I felt like the process itself was the problem. And if there's something that I don't like within my own practice, I can change it because I have free will. And the same applies to you. So if you feel like you're in a creative rut, this first part of this framework is just holding that awareness and remembering that you can change whatever you need to change in order for your practice to feel more activating, more exciting to you. And isn't that a relief? Isn't that really great to know? I feel like what tends to happen for creatives is, for example, you don't write for a month and then you create meaning and you create this story around what that means about you. And the story will be something like, oh, I didn't write for a month, which means that I'm lazy or I'm inconsistent or I'm not a good writer, etc. But the question is that helping you? Has shame, and I mean this, has shame ever been effective long-term as a strategy for getting you to do something or to change? Is it useful to create a story, to mythologize, to identify with the rut, with the stagnation, with the dissatisfaction? Is that helping you? Or, and hear me out, is it more helpful to take note of the situation and go, oh, this is information that I want to change something. There's something in myself or in the process, in my work, that wants to be shifted, reoriented. So now you can go do that. You can problem solve. And that level of awareness and mindset is going to take practice, especially if you're the type of person who does something that you deem wrong and immediately jump to conclusions about what that means about you. I've been there. I love identifying with my vices. But it is more helpful, especially if it's something that you want to change and is within your power to change, to de-identify with the story and instead just say, oh, there's something that wants to be investigated. There's something that needs my curiosity right now. But once you recognize that you're in a creative rut, all you need to do is remember that you have the power and the ability to shift it, to change that. And now we're getting into a more solutions-oriented mindset, which is inherently creative. Part 2, identify what you want to move towards. So the next step is just to dig in, to get curious and ask yourself questions. What specifically do I not like about my current situation? And what do I want to orient towards moving forward? Now, it's really important to note that there's going to become a point in which knowing what the problem is or knowing what you want to change stops being useful. I'm once again asking for you to hear me out. There's going to come a point in this part of the framework where you have to shift away from understanding the problem to orienting towards the solutions, orienting towards what you want to create next or what you want to experience next. And it can be a slippery process because, again, it's valuable to understand the root cause of your issue or of your dissatisfaction, but there will come a point in which you have enough information to make a different choice. And so when you come to that point, and I believe it's a skill that you just develop over time and doing this enough, once you have enough information, you now have to shift your eyes away from the problem and towards what you want more of, what you are looking to experience moving forward. And I say this, by the way, as someone who loves to intellectualize, loves to rationalize, but yes, it is more useful and it feels better to build a world around what you are craving more of rather than what you are moving away from. Part 3, rebuild in that direction. The final part of this framework is just to create action steps to get yourself there, to get yourself closer or more in contact with what you're craving through your creative process. One way to do this is you can brainstorm 30 different ways that you could fulfill that need. Not really a lot to explain here. You literally just, now that you know what you want, take the time to think about how you can create more of that in your life, or you can also take inspiration from where you're already having that need met and see how you can bring more of whatever's happening in the area of your life where that need is being met into your creative process. I'll share my example. I already mentioned that earlier this year, I felt like I was very uninspired by the work that I was creating, which then led me to rethink my entire creative process. And one of the things that came up is that I basically have two different modes of creating. I have, and actually I'm going to say writing because I don't want to keep saying the word creating for some reason. I have two different modes of writing. I have writing that is for exploration and writing that is for public consumption. And the writing for exploration has always been very satisfying as a process. However, when I'm writing for consumption first, I'll say like primarily, the process felt really shallow, I guess, in my body. Not necessarily the work I was making, but just the process was not very satisfying, but the product was okay until it wasn't. Well, once I understood that those were two separate entities, it made me realize that in my content process over here, the one that's built more for sharing, what I wanted was to take the process more seriously, to be more intentional and deliberate about how I was creating the work. So for me, I wanted it to feel more like an art practice than like a content production machine. There's nothing wrong with the content production machine inherently. But for me, I'm a very sensation-based person. And so the feeling that I was experiencing through the process was just not motivating enough for me to continue doing it or to sustain it over long periods of time. So I realized what I'm craving, what I want to move towards is a more deliberate, a more intentional, a more spiritual in a lot of ways, energetic landscape for my content creation process. And I'm realizing now that this was a really extended way to say that basically the vibes were off. I wanted to curate a similar vibe to what I do when I'm creating solely for exploration. I'm doing that process because the inherent value is in the process, is in the doing. So there's so much immediate value that I get from my creating for exploration because every moment that I'm doing a thing and I'm learning something new, or I'm uncovering a secret rule that I had, then I'm like, oh, let's examine that. That's really rewarding in and of itself. With the content creation, the energetics that I was bringing into the space were just not enough to make me want to sustain it. So now I am shifting my entire creative process to have more of a sacred space, a more sacred energy around creating content specifically. So that's really it. The main thing that I want you to remember, if you do no other part of this, I really need you to remember that being stuck is a choice once you recognize that you feel stuck. Okay? Because you always have the power, the skill, the ability, the curiosity you can always find a way to adjust your behavior or your mindset, the way that you're framing your experience or the story you're telling yourself. There's always something that can be adjusted to make you feel a little bit less stuck. So if you only take one thing from this, remember that once you recognize you're stuck, it is your job to create solutions, not to wallow. Take your time to wallow though, but there's gonna come a point where wallowing stops being useful and you need to start orienting towards what you want to experience next. So if you made it to the end of this video and you're thinking that you might need to reshape your entire creative process, last week, I talked about 5 questions that you should ask before committing to any project or transformation. You want to make sure that you're orienting in the right direction. Thank you for watching.